He came for a horse and nothing more. Grief had emptied him, left him hollow. But fate wasn't finished. Beneath the barn's shadow, he heard the cry of a child. And in that moment, silence gave way to purpose, and a man who thought he'd lost everything found two souls who needed him more. The horse was roped tight in the far pen, snorting, kicking at the dirt, but Joshua didn't flinch. He barely blinked. The animal's wild-eyed panic couldn't reach him, not after burying his wife 3 months ago and standing over a crib that would never be filled again. He adjusted his hat against the sun, the creases in his face older than 40 winters ought to allow, then knocked once on the slat door of the barn. It swung open without sound. A man stepped out, squat, sunburned, his shirt half-buttoned and stained with sweat. "You're late," the man grunted. Joshua didn't answer. He wasn't here for pleasantries. "You got the horse?" he asked flatly. The man jerked a thumb toward the pen, stubborn as hell but strong. Joshua stepped forward, eyes narrowing. The horse was shaking, not from fight but fear. Something about it twisted in his gut. Then he heard it. Faint, a thud, a shuffle, a choked sound like someone trying not to cry. Joshua froze. The barn was quiet except for the horse's snorts and the wind dragging dust across the open plains. The sound came again. Not a rat, not wind. It was human, small, hurting. He turned. "What's back there?" The man shifted too fast. "Storage. You're here for a horse, not a tour." But Joshua was already walking, boots echoing on old wood. The man grabbed his arm. Joshua's hand shot up and shoved him back hard enough to stumble. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He found the ladder behind a stack of old crates, half hidden by tarp. The smell hit him first. Urine, feces, fear. Then he saw the cage. And inside it 2 children. One crouched low, no older than 8, arms wrapped around a smaller figure, maybe 5, who didn't even lift their head. Just a mop of hair, thin limbs, bruises where wrists had been bound. Joshua stared, breath shallow. The older one stared back, defiant despite sunken cheeks and cracked lips. "Please," the child whispered, voice shaking, "don't let him shut the door again." The man behind him cursed. "Ain't your concern," he snapped. "They ain't yours, belonged to a woman who owed too much coin. She's dead now, just leftovers." Joshua turned slowly. "You selling them?" The man raised his chin. "Ain't illegal if no one asks." The heat in Joshua's chest ignited. Not anger, something deeper, something colder. He looked back at the children. The boy's eyes didn't plead, they challenged. "You'll walk away too," those eyes said, like the last one, and the one before that. Joshua reached for his wallet. "What's the price?" he asked. The man blinked. "For the horse?" "No," Joshua said, "for them." The man laughed, a low, dry bark. "What the hell do you want with 2 near-feral brats?" Joshua didn't answer. He dropped gold coins one by one into the dust between them. The clink of metal silenced the barn. The man stared, counted, snorted. "Fine, take 'em. More trouble than they're worth." He tossed Joshua a key, careless, as if unlocking a door didn't mean saving a life. Joshua caught it midair. He knelt beside the cage, fingers trembling for the first time in months as he slid the key into the lock. It stuck. Rusted. He forced it. The door squealed open. The girl, he could see now it was a girl, flinched so hard she nearly hit her head. The boy pulled her tighter. "Don't touch her," he warned. "She's mine." Joshua didn't move. "I'm not here to hurt her," he said gently. "Or you." The boy's jaw quivered, but he didn't let go. "Then why'd you buy us?" Joshua searched for the answer but didn't find it in time. The girl's eyes opened slowly, green as prairie grass after rain. "Are you taking us away?" she asked. Joshua nodded. "Yes." The boy stood at last, legs wobbling. "Then hurry," he said, voice cracking, "before he changes his mind." They left the cage behind, but not the fear. Joshua lifted the girl into his arms, careful of her weight, far too light. She didn't protest. The boy limped after, barefoot, each step deliberate, like he didn't trust the ground wouldn't vanish under him. Outside, the sun burned bright. The man didn't follow. Good. Joshua didn't want to find out how far his control would stretch. He loaded the children onto his wagon without ceremony, covering them with a spare quilt. "What are your names?" he asked. The boy hesitated. "Finn," he said finally. "And that's my sister June." Joshua nodded once. "Joshua." He didn't offer more. Couldn't. Words still lodged like glass in his throat every time he thought of saying my wife is gone or my daughter never got to live. They rode for hours in silence, save for the creak of the wheels and the occasional cough from June. Joshua watched her through the corner of his eye. She never once let go of Finn's hand, not even when sleep dragged her under. Finn didn't sleep. He watched the road, watched Joshua, waiting to see if kindness had teeth. By sundown, they reached the ridge overlooking Dry Hill, a town too small for anything but gossip and too mean to spare it. Joshua had land a few miles west, but he wasn't ready to bring strangers to the house his wife built, not yet. Instead, he turned toward the line of trees by the creek and pulled up near the old smokehouse his neighbor had abandoned last spring. Still standing, still dry. He carried June in and laid her gently on a pile of hay. Finn followed, arms crossed tight. "We can sleep in the barn," the boy said. "Don't need to stay close." Joshua didn't look at him. "It's not the barn, it's shelter." He lit a lantern. The shadows danced along the walls like ghosts who'd never left. June stirred in her sleep, murmuring something too soft to catch. Joshua's chest tightened. She couldn't be more than 5. He handed Finn a cup of water. The boy drank slow, watching him the whole time. "You gonna sell us again?" he asked. Joshua froze. "No, everyone sells us." Joshua sat beside him. "I'm not everyone." The silence stretched long, then Finn whispered, "You smell like someone who lost something too." The words cut deeper than any accusation. Joshua didn't reply, just set another log on the fire and let it burn. The night brought no peace. June cried out once, fingers twitching. Joshua woke and covered her shoulders again. Finn never closed his eyes. By morning the frost had crept under the door and rimmed the windows. Joshua saddled his mare and handed Finn a coat too large for him. "We're heading to town," he said. "Need supplies." Finn eyed him. "She's not going anywhere without me." "Then bring her," Joshua said. No hesitation, no argument. Finn blinked, then nodded. They reached Dry Hill by noon, its streets half frozen and half mud. Townsfolk stared. Joshua had always been quiet, distant even. Now he walked with 2 ragged children at his side, and that drew looks, whispers. He ignored them. The general store was warm and bright, and the clerk raised an eyebrow when Finn reached for jerky. "Put it on my tab," Joshua said. The clerk obliged, but asked, "That your kin?" Joshua didn't answer. They were walking out when a voice snapped like a whip across the street. "Hey!" Joshua turned. A tall man stepped forward from the saloon porch, clean coat, too clean, a sheriff's badge gleaming like it had something to prove. "Those children with you?" he asked. Joshua's jaw set. "They are." The man nodded toward June, who was hiding behind her brother. "Funny thing," he said slowly. "Heard a pair like them went missing down south. Rancher claimed they were his." Joshua felt Finn stiffen beside him. The sheriff took a step forward. "Might be I need to ask some questions." Joshua stepped between them. "They're not his, I paid for them." The sheriff frowned. "Paid like stock." Joshua's eyes went cold. "Like human beings that needed saving." The sheriff stared, chewing on that. "You got proof?" Joshua said nothing. Finn's hand found his. For the first time, Joshua gripped it back. The sheriff opened his mouth. But what he said, what he did, was lost to the sound that came from behind the saloon. A scream, high, ragged, terrified. A woman burst into the street, dress torn, blood on her arms. "Help!" she sobbed. "He's still in there." Everyone turned. But Joshua didn't hesitate. He shoved June into Finn's arms. "Stay with her," he said, and ran. The saloon was half shadow, the air heavy with smoke and spilled liquor. Joshua didn't stop at the threshold. He crossed it in 3 long strides, boots thudding against warped floorboards. The woman's scream still echoed somewhere inside, frantic and raw. A card table had been overturned, glass crunched underfoot, and from the back room came the sound of scuffling, furniture dragged, a grunt, something breaking. Joshua's hand went to his belt, to the revolver he hadn't used in weeks. He didn't draw it. Not yet. A child had cried in a barn once, and he hadn't acted fast enough. He wouldn't make that mistake again. He kicked the backroom door open with a crack that shook the walls. The scene inside was chaos. A man, broad, sweat-slicked, sleeves rolled up, had another man pinned against the bar's side wall, his fist rising and falling with rhythmic violence. Blood smeared the floor. Behind them, a girl no older than June sobbed quietly, huddled beneath a table, clutching a broken locket in both hands. "Enough," Joshua said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. The man turned, fist half raised, chest heaving. His knuckles were raw, lips curled in a sneer. "Ain't your business," he growled. Joshua's eyes flicked from the girl to the man on the floor, older, unconscious, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "You beat him near to death," Joshua said. "Over what?" "She's my daughter," the big man barked. "He touched her, I saw him. Don't need no law to deal with that." Joshua didn't argue, he looked to the girl. "Is it true?" The girl shook her head so fast her hair slapped her cheeks. "He's my uncle," she whispered. "He was trying to protect me. Papa drank too much. He always," her voice caught, broke. Joshua's blood turned cold. The man stepped forward, pointing a finger in Joshua's face. "You got no right." "I've got 2 children out there," Joshua said quietly, "and if any man ever raises a hand to them, I'll make sure his bones never see clean ground again." The big man paled, but his pride kept his fists tight. "Back off," Joshua said, and this time he meant it. The sheriff arrived then, flanked by 2 deputies. Too late, too slow. He took in the scene and sighed, shoulders sinking like a man already tired of the mess. "Joshua," he said, "I told you to stay put." "Then move faster next time," Joshua muttered, stepping aside. He wasn't interested in watching the law sort things out. It never really did, not here, not where justice meant something different for every man with a badge. He returned to the street, heart still pounding, to find Finn standing tall and still, June wrapped in his arms. Both looked up at him, wide-eyed. "You left," Finn said, not accusing, just stunned. Joshua knelt beside them. "I came back." "You always gonna come back." Joshua didn't answer, not because he couldn't, because the question cut too deep and the answer wasn't ready. Instead, he said, "Let's go home." Except he didn't know if he had one anymore. Back at the smokehouse, the wind picked up, rattling loose boards and hissing through the trees. June had barely touched her bread at supper. Finn sat cross-legged by the hearth, sharpening a stick into a rough point with one of Joshua's old knives. Neither spoke much. Joshua cleaned his rifle more out of habit than need. His mind wasn't on bullets or bandits, it was on what came next. You don't take 2 children from a cage and just raise them. You unpack years of pain with your bare hands. You carry them through storms they don't even know they're walking through. That night June had a nightmare. Her scream wasn't loud, but it was enough to wake them all. She clung to Finn, trembling so hard she nearly fell from her bed of blankets. "It was dark again," she whispered. "He was there." Joshua sat with them until dawn. In the morning, the smokehouse felt smaller, like the walls were breathing shallow alongside them. Joshua rose early and fed the horses, then set to boiling water for the morning meal. He barely noticed when Finn appeared at his elbow, watching. "You were gonna leave her," Finn said. "Back at the barn, you were gonna take me and leave her." Joshua blinked, caught off guard. "No," he said, slow, "I was." Finn didn't answer. He stared into the fire like it might confess something Joshua couldn't. Later, they visited the land Joshua still called his own. The house hadn't changed, its windows still intact, the fence still upright, though some rails sagged from snow and time. He opened the door slow, like waking an old friend from sleep. June didn't want to go in at first. She gripped Finn's hand so hard her knuckles went white. "Whose house is this?" she whispered. Joshua stood behind them. "It was mine," he said. "It's yours now too if you want it." June peered up at him. "Are you a papa?" Joshua didn't flinch. "I was." "You can be again," she said, not as a plea, just a fact, and turned away. The inside was clean but untouched. He hadn't been back since the funeral. His wife's sewing basket still sat near the rocker, one of her scarves half-knit and tangled. The cradle he built sat in the corner, empty. June went to it like drawn, resting her tiny hand against the side. "You had a baby." Joshua's throat worked hard. "Not long," he said. Finn hovered near the door, eyes flicking between rooms, alert for danger that never came. He didn't trust peace. Not yet. The days passed slow but not quiet. There were fences to mend, a coop to fix, firewood to stack. Joshua gave them small tasks, ones that made them feel useful. Finn took to the axe like he'd seen one in dreams, cutting with angry, deliberate swipes. June helped in the garden, kneeling in dirt with a quiet grace. She hummed sometimes when she thought no one was listening. But it couldn't last. On the sixth night, Joshua rode into town alone for feed. When he returned, the door to the house was open. The lamp inside had been knocked over, and Finn was bleeding. A gash ran across his forehead, shallow but messy. He sat against the wall, breathing hard, arms around June, who was crying silently, her eyes wide with terror. "They came," Finn said. Joshua's heart dropped. "Who?" "Men from the barn said you didn't pay enough, said she was still theirs." Joshua knelt fast. "How many?" "Two," Finn said. "June hid. I tried to stop them." Joshua helped him up gently. "You did good," he said, "real good," but his hands shook. June wouldn't speak for hours after. When she did, it was only one word, over and over: "Don't take us back." Joshua didn't sleep that night. He sat by the door, rifle in lap, the fire gone cold. If they came again, he wouldn't talk, he wouldn't buy, he wouldn't bargain. They would not take these children. By morning, word had spread. The sheriff came up the trail by noon, slow and cautious. Joshua didn't wait for him to speak. "You hear what happened?" The sheriff nodded. "Men like that don't just vanish. They're part of something. Been rumors, girls taken, boys sold." "Then stop it." "I'm trying." "Try harder." The sheriff looked over Joshua's shoulder to where June sat on the porch, her arms around a straw doll Finn had made her. "They trust you," he said. "That's more than most folks get." "I'm not most folks," Joshua said. The sheriff handed him a folded piece of parchment. "Warrants," he said, "but not names, just faces. Someone's got to identify 'em. Might take time." Joshua stared at the paper. "I'll find them." The sheriff hesitated. "Don't do something that gets you hanged." "If I die," Joshua said, "they'll die too, so I won't." The sheriff said nothing more. Joshua watched him ride away, and only then noticed Finn standing beside him. "You're going after them," Finn said, "not a question." "I am." "Then I'm coming too." Joshua looked down. The boy's face was still bruised, his lips swollen but his spine straight. "I need you here," Joshua said, "to protect her." Finn's jaw clenched. "Then you better come back." Joshua nodded. "I will." But neither of them believed in promises anymore. Joshua left before first light. The house was still. Shadows stretched thin as thread across the walls, but he lingered at the door all the same. Finn had wedged a chair under the front knob like he'd seen Joshua do. June slept on the floor beside him, her hand resting over Finn's heart like she needed to make sure it kept beating. Joshua didn't wake them. He just pulled the blanket higher over June's shoulder, then stepped into the gray. He rode hard through the valley, wind cutting sharp against his cheeks, the cold burning into his beard like frostbite from old memories. But he welcomed the sting. It reminded him he could still feel, still hurt, and hurting was proof he hadn't turned into stone entirely. He didn't stop until Dry Hill vanished behind the hills and the land dipped into rougher country, where trails gave way to whispers and the horizon stretched wide and lawless. The man he was looking for wouldn't be in any town. He wasn't hunting a name, he was hunting a trade. By dusk, Joshua reached a way station known more by reputation than name, an outpost tucked between nowhere and regret. 3 shacks, 1 trough, and a sign so faded it looked more like rot than paint. 2 horses were tied out front. Joshua tied his to a post and stepped inside the biggest shack without knocking. The room fell quiet. 4 men stared up from a card table. One had a scar across his throat. Another had hands too clean for someone out here. Joshua nodded once. I'm looking for a man trades in things he shouldn't, he said. The scarred man leaned back. Aren't we all? This one sells children. No one spoke. Joshua placed the paper on the table, faces hand-drawn but clear. Two of them matched the ones who'd come to his house. They showed up at my place 3 nights ago, he said. Left bleeding, not bleeding enough. The man with clean hands frowned. You law. If I was, Joshua said, I'd have shot first. That got a chuckle. One of the others poured him a drink without asking. Joshua didn't touch it. Word is, the scarred man finally said, they ride with a trader goes by Lark. Real name's Darian, but no one calls him that anymore. He's got a camp 2 days northeast. Moves a lot. Sells damaged stock to ranchers who want hands that don't talk. Joshua nodded. What about the ones too broken to work? Gone, the man said simply. They don't get resold. Joshua picked up the paper, folded it, and stood. If they come through again, he said, you tell them they already picked the wrong man's house. No one stopped him. No one offered help either. That was fine. He didn't want allies. He wanted blood. He camped near a dry creek that night, the stars sharp and watching. He didn't sleep. Just leaned against his saddle, thinking of the cage, of June's voice hoarse with pleading, of Finn's hands clenched into fists too small to fight back, and of the rage building in him, a quiet, steady kind, the kind that didn't fade with time but sharpened. By morning his mare was restless beneath him, sensing the change in her rider. The land turned harsher with each mile, scrub brush and twisted trees, earth cracked and dry as old bones. Around midday he spotted the smoke. Thin, controlled, not a signal, not a cookfare, a camp carefully placed. Joshua dismounted a mile out, leading the horse into the shadows. He moved low, slow, the way his father taught him before war and whiskey took him. He crested a ridge and saw them. The camp had 6 tents. A wagon near the center covered in canvas, bars glinting beneath the folds. A cage. Children inside, 3 of them. One sat listless, the other 2 clung to each other, eyes darting like rabbits. Men lounged around the fire, rifles nearby but not in hand. They weren't expecting trouble. Joshua counted 8, 2 more than he'd hoped. He waited until night. The fire burned lower. Some men slept, others drank. Joshua moved like smoke, creeping to the edge of the camp. One man wandered off to relieve himself. Joshua met him in the dark, quiet and final. He hid the body beneath scrub, then stole the man's rifle and coat. Dressed in their stink, he moved closer, nodding to another sentry who didn't look too closely. Close enough now to hear the cage creak as a child shifted. A girl, maybe June's age, whispering a lullaby to herself. Joshua's hands tightened. He slipped behind the wagon and used the stolen rifle to jam the axle. Then he crouched low and waited. Minutes passed like hours. Then he struck. A shout, a flash. The rifle cracked once, just once, but it was enough. Chaos erupted. Joshua used the confusion to dart toward the cage, dropping beside the children. Quiet, he said. I'm here to get you out. One boy sobbed. The girl tried to speak but couldn't. Her lip was split. Joshua pulled a small crowbar from his belt and wedged it into the lock. Rust screamed. The cage gave. The children poured into his arms, weightless with fear. Run west, he whispered, until you see the ridge. My horse is tied there. She'll carry you. Alone, the girl asked. Not for long. He turned back as one of the men spotted him. There. Bullets tore through the night. Joshua rolled, ducking behind the wagon. The children fled, shadows darting toward freedom. Men shouted, 2 charged. Joshua took one down with a shot to the knee. The other slammed into him and they crashed into the dirt. Fists flew. Joshua tasted blood, smelled whiskey. He fought dirty, elbows, knees, teeth if he had to. The man didn't rise again. Then a voice rang out, calm, cold. Joshua Harlow. Joshua froze. A figure stepped into the firelight. Tall, elegant, a coat too fine for dust and violence. Lark. His face was smooth, smile smoothers. Didn't expect you'd come calling yourself. Thought you might send the sheriff. Or a bullet. Joshua stood. I figured I owed it to you in person. You cost me merchandise, Lark said, twice now. They're children. Their debt, Lark hissed. Unpaid, unwanted. The world runs on currency, Harlow. Yours was grief. Mine is flesh. Who are you to say which is more useful? Joshua raised his rifle. Lark didn't flinch. You shoot me, they'll scatter. My men will burn every town looking for those kids. You want that? Joshua's hands didn't tremble. I shoot you, they scatter, but no one comes looking, because they're afraid I'm still out here. Lark smiled. Then Joshua pulled the trigger. The camp fell still. 2 men fled. The rest lay bleeding or stunned. Joshua didn't care. He took what weapons he could, cut the horses loose, and poured lamp oil over the cage. He lit it with a match and didn't look back as it burned. He found the children huddled near the ridge, wide-eyed but safe. His mare stood waiting, patient and proud. He helped them up, one by one, and led them back through the dark. They reached his house near dawn. Finn was on the porch, eyes red from watching the trail all night. When he saw the children, he blinked hard. More? He asked. Joshua nodded. They didn't have anyone. Finn stepped forward. They do now. Joshua knelt beside June. She was still asleep, arms wrapped around that straw doll, her cheek pressed to a worn blanket like it was the only safe thing in the world. He didn't wake her. He just sat beside the fire and watched the sky turn pale. But peace didn't last. By mid-morning, a rider appeared on the ridge, alone, fast. The sheriff. Joshua stepped out to meet him. We've got trouble, the sheriff said without dismounting. Lark had a brother, meaner, more connected, words already spreading. Let it. He's not coming with questions, Harlow. He's coming with fire. Joshua looked past him to the children, Finn watching, the others too tired to speak. Then we'll be ready. The snow had melted early that year, and spring arrived with sharp winds and mud-thick roads, but the air outside Joshua's homestead no longer felt still. It was heavy now, charged with the kind of tension that comes before a storm, not from the sky, but from men. Inside the house, 6 children slept in silence that wasn't peace. It was caution, exhaustion. Finn had taken to sleeping near the door again, his hand resting over the handle of the knife Joshua had given him. June never strayed far from Joshua's side. She didn't speak of the cage anymore, but she kept her shoes on, even in bed. Joshua stood on the porch with the sheriff, neither man bothering to sit. How many? Joshua asked, eyes fixed on the horizon. 3, maybe 4 riders, the sheriff replied. Not a gang, not yet, but that's the first wave. If Lark's brother is who I think he is, he'll send more once he confirms his suspicions. Joshua didn't ask the name. Names didn't matter, only intent. You bring a deputy, he asked. The sheriff shook his head. They got families. I didn't ask them to come. And you? Joshua asked, glancing sideways. My family's gone, the sheriff said, his voice flat. A long time ago, and I still sleep better knowing men like that don't get to walk away clean. Joshua didn't thank him. He just nodded once and went back inside, where the fire was low and the weight of too many memories hung in the air. The girl he'd brought back from the cage, her name was Clara, he'd learned, sat near the hearth brushing June's hair in slow, tender strokes. The 2 boys that had come with her, Ellis and Tom, were in the loft with Finn, repairing the sling for the woodpile with some old twine. They spoke in low murmurs, like they knew something was coming and didn't want to wake it. We'll need to move the horses, Joshua said to Finn later that morning, leading him out to the barn. Tie them behind the ridge near the river bend. If we get overrun, they won't get caught in the crossfire. You think they'll bring fire? Finn asked. Or bullets? Joshua didn't answer immediately. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. They're not coming to argue, Finn. They're coming to make an example. We just have to make sure they don't live long enough to try. They dug trenches that afternoon, shallow but well placed. The sheriff helped reinforce the window shutters and hammer a slab of old iron across the front door's lower half. Every board creaked with the weight of preparation, the sound of it as familiar to Joshua now as his own heartbeat. He once built this house with his wife, one beam at a time, never thinking he'd one day fortify it like a fortress to protect a family he hadn't chosen, but one he wouldn't let go of now if the earth split beneath them. That night he sat outside cleaning his rifle with slow, practiced care. Finn joined him after the others were asleep. "You're not scared," Finn said. "I used to be," Joshua replied. "All the time, lost a lot because of it." He glanced at the boy. "Fear's not what keeps us alive, Finn. It's what teaches us how much we've got to lose." Finn nodded slowly, processing that. "You think we can keep them safe?" "We can try," Joshua said. "And if we fail," he paused, "we don't plan to fail." The riders came at dawn. No warning, no cries, just the low thunder of hooves muffled by the damp ground and the flicker of shadows between trees, 4 of them, faces half covered with scarves, hats low, guns visible. One of them held a torch. The sheriff stepped onto the porch, shotgun in hand, just as Joshua raised his rifle. "State your business," the sheriff called. One rider laughed. "Business? Thought that ended when your friend here killed Lark." Joshua raised his voice. "Your brother took children, sold them, beat them. He got what he earned." "That's so," the lead rider called. "You got something that belonged to him. Now it belongs to me. Send the girl out." Joshua felt June's small fingers wrap around his leg from behind. She had come out, silent as breath, barefoot despite the cold. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't let them take me." He turned and lifted her gently, passing her back inside to Finn without a word. Then he stepped forward, gun low but ready. "She's not going anywhere." There was a beat of silence, then the rider spat in the dirt. "Burn it." The man with the torch hurled it toward the barn, but before it landed, Joshua's rifle cracked once, torch dropped, man falling with it. The horses screamed. Then the chaos began. The other 3 riders charged, guns drawn. The sheriff dropped one clean through the chest. Joshua rolled behind the woodpile, returning fire. The 3rd rider made it to the porch, leaping from his horse with a roar, slamming into Joshua's shoulder. They fell hard. Joshua lost his grip on the rifle, barely twisting in time to avoid a knife to the ribs. He struck with his elbow once, twice, before the blade cut across his cheek. Blood blurred his vision. He shoved the man back just long enough to get his hands around his throat, and didn't let go until the man stilled. The last rider turned tail. But Joshua, breath ragged, didn't chase. He'd made his point. Inside, the children huddled in the corner. June cried openly now, and Clara held her clothes. The sheriff came in, blood on his shirt but not his own. "That'll send a message," he said. "Or bring more," Joshua said. They buried the bodies behind the ridge. Horses were sent loose. Joshua didn't want their blood on the land too. 2 days passed with no sign of riders. Joshua didn't relax. He knew men like Lark's brother. They didn't strike once and slink away. They built storms, gathered allies, waited until your back was turned. On the 3rd morning, Ellis didn't come down from the loft. Finn found him curled in a ball, shaking. "He don't talk," Clara said softly, brushing mud from her skirt. "Not since the barn, but he listens. He knows." Joshua sat beside the boy, speaking slow. "You're safe now. No one's coming to take you, not while I'm breathing." Ellis didn't reply, but he looked at him, and that was enough. That night June climbed into Joshua's lap without asking, her cheek pressed against his chest. "Will you stay even after they stop coming?" Joshua looked down at her, at the child who had been thrown away like trash and somehow still found the strength to trust. "If you want me to," he said. She nodded. "I want you to be my papa." The words lodged like thorns in his heart. He hadn't heard them in years, hadn't expected to ever hear them again. "Then I will," he whispered. But peace had a short shelf life. A letter arrived the next morning, tied to the leg of a crow-bitten pigeon. A scrap of parchment, scrawled in thick, furious ink. You took what's mine. You killed my brother. You won't see me coming. MC. Joshua folded the letter and burned it in the fire. He didn't speak of it to the children, didn't tell the sheriff, but that night he reinforced the traps around the perimeter, planted broken glass beneath the windows, loaded every weapon twice. Because he knew who MC was now. Matthew Crowley. The man who once ran every slave ring from Dry Hill to Bitter Hollow. The man who vanished after a warrant went south. The man who'd bought and sold more children than anyone dared count. Lark was his younger brother, a pawn. Matthew was the king. And now he was coming for blood. The land turned still before it broke. That's how Joshua knew. No birdsong in the early morning, no rustle of wind through the dry grass, just a silence that didn't belong. It had weight to it like breath held too long. He stood on the roof of the barn with a spyglass, sweeping the horizon slowly. Finn climbed the ladder behind him, careful with his steps, boots barely making a sound. He didn't speak until Joshua lowered the glass. "You see him?" the boy asked. "No," Joshua muttered, "but he's out there." Down below, June was helping Clara braid twine into one of the horse's manes, her little hands gentle but distracted. She looked up too often. They all did now. Even the laughter had changed. It wasn't joy anymore, it was defiance. A sound carved out of fear, like if they stopped making it, the silence would win. Joshua had told them Crowley might come. He hadn't said when. He hadn't said how, only that they would be ready. The traps around the land had been reset. Every window in the house had been reinforced with planks and nails. The barn had been cleared to hold the children if the house fell. The root cellar had a back exit, hidden by an old chicken coop and a mess of logs that looked like firewood but were really a tunnel marker. Still, Joshua knew none of it might be enough. Crowley wasn't the kind of man who fought fair. He came in pieces. The first sign was a merchant wagon tipped on its side 3 miles east. Burned, horses gone, driver shot in the head and left with a coin in his mouth. Not stolen, placed. The sheriff found it when he rode out that afternoon to check the trade trail. He came back tight-jawed, spitting dust and fury. "He's not hiding," the sheriff said, slamming the tin badge onto Joshua's table. "He's announcing himself." Joshua studied the coin the man had left. It was silver, tarnished black along one edge. Crowley's old marker. He'd used it before, back when he ran flesh markets from the old mines outside Silver Bend. Before the governor's man rode west with warrants and left Crowley's name on every wanted poster from Red Gulch to Fallen Crossing. "You still want to fight him here?" the sheriff asked. "We can ride, take the children, disappear into the mountains. There's places to hide." Joshua shook his head. "We run, he'll never stop chasing. We stand, we might end it." The sheriff didn't argue, just picked his badge back up and pinned it to his shirt again. That night Clara woke screaming. It wasn't the kind of scream that faded. It clawed its way through the walls, sharp and panicked. Joshua was at her side in seconds, rifle in hand, before he even realized she wasn't hurt. She sat bolt upright in her cot, eyes wide, sweat running down her face. "He was here," she gasped, "in the window, watching." "No one was here," Joshua said, though his own gut twisted. "The traps are all unbroken." "I saw him," she whispered. "His face," he smiled. Joshua stayed at the window until morning, rifle across his knees, eyes never blinking. The next morning, a note was found pinned to the barn door. No tracks, no footprints, just a knife through wood and a message scrawled in blood. "I see you, Harlow. I see your little orphans. I will make you watch." The children weren't told, but something changed in them after that. June started carrying her doll everywhere, even to the privy, clutching it like a talisman. Finn stopped asking to help outside. Even Tom, who hadn't spoken a full sentence since they found him, started rocking himself when it got too quiet. Joshua and the sheriff rode out that day, following signs west. They found another farm burned to its bones, animals slaughtered in their pens. No survivors, just a handprint on the back wall smeared in soot and ash. Child-sized. "He's not just sending a message," the sheriff muttered. "He's trying to make us question which children are ours." Joshua looked at the mark. "No," he said. "He's trying to make the children question if we'll still be here tomorrow." Back at the homestead, Finn was waiting. He'd organized the others, armed them with sticks and old shovels, even rigged a bell to the front gate using a kettle and some string. "We heard a whistle," Finn said. "Just once, out near the trees, then it stopped." Joshua nodded. "Good work. Keep them inside after sunset." That night it rained. First time in weeks. Not a soft rain, but a cold, angry one. The kind that pounded on the roof like fists and flooded the earth till it ran slick and dark. Joshua sat in the main room, rifle close, eyes on the door. Beside him, June had fallen asleep curled in his coat. Then the bell rang. Once. Then twice. Joshua was up in a flash, motioning for the sheriff, who came from the kitchen. Both men moved fast, quiet. They reached the porch just as lightning split the sky. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a figure. Not moving, not speaking. A girl. Joshua's heart nearly stopped. She looked 7, barefoot. Her dress was soaked through and torn. He stepped forward. "Who are you?" She didn't answer. Then she lifted her head, and Joshua's blood froze. It wasn't just any girl. It was Ellis's sister. The one Crowley had taken first. "Help," she whispered. The sheriff raised his shotgun. "It's a trap." Joshua took one step closer. "Where's Crowley?" The girl turned her head, and another bolt of lightning lit the trees behind her. Figures moving. They came fast. Joshua fired first. The sheriff followed. Bullets tore through the storm. One man fell. Another made it to the porch but was driven back by a swing of Joshua's rifle. The girl screamed and dropped to the mud. "She's real," the sheriff shouted. "She's real." Joshua hauled her up, tucking her under one arm, dragging her back into the house. The door slammed shut behind them, just as 2 bullets punched through the wall inches from Finn's head. "Basement," Joshua ordered. "Now." The children ran. June held tight to her doll. Clara helped Ellis, who had frozen at the sound of the shots. They poured into the root cellar. Joshua and the sheriff stayed behind, reloading. Then quiet. Too much of it. Joshua peered out the window, raindrops streaking the glass. They were gone. All of them. Except the girl. She sat on the rug now, staring at the fire. "Where is he?" Joshua asked. She didn't speak, just rocked herself. "Where's Crowley?" Her eyes lifted slowly. "He said you'd ask that." Joshua stepped closer. "And what else did he say?" She hesitated. Then quietly, "He said he'd burn your house last, after he makes you dig all the graves." The wind slammed a shutter open. Outside, the trees swayed. The trap had only just begun. The storm passed, but Crowley's shadow didn't. It hung in the trees, in the silence between thunder and the blood-flecked mud outside Joshua's door. By morning, the girl was sleeping on a cot near the hearth, curled beneath a quilt June had pulled over her. No one knew her name. She hadn't offered it, and no one had pressed. Her arrival had shattered something, left the children skittish, sleepless, and watching the windows like prey. Joshua stood in the barn, tying knots with shaking hands. "You trust her?" the sheriff asked from behind him. Joshua didn't answer right away. The rope bit into his palm. "She's a child," he said finally. "So were the ones Crowley broke and made into spies," the sheriff replied. "So was June." Joshua turned, the knot forgotten. "You saying we turn her out?" "I'm saying Crowley doesn't fight like a man. He fights like a sickness. Gets into your blood before you realize you're dying. Joshua looked through the slats in the barn wall, toward the house. She's staying, he said. She's not the one we're fighting. But even as he said it, he wondered who she was now, and what she might have been before. That afternoon, Clara came to him with a question that shouldn't have mattered. What color were your wife's eyes? Joshua looked up from where he was oiling the hinges on the cellar door. Brown, he said, dark. Clara nodded. Mine were too once. My mama's were green, I forget sometimes. I think that's the worst part. You remembering means they mattered. No, Clara said softly. It means I'm losing the pieces too slow. Joshua didn't have an answer for that, not one he could give. They buried another body the next morning. Not one of Crowley's men, this one was old, dead before Crowley ever got near. A traveler found on the edge of the ridge, rifle missing, shoes gone. The sheriff figured he'd been used as bait and then discarded. Joshua just stared at the man's hands. They were bound. Crowley was sending messages again. That night the girl finally spoke her name, Wren. Just one word, no last name, no explanation. She whispered it to June while they curled up near the fire, then fell asleep mid-sentence. Joshua watched them from the table, notepad open, sketching layouts of the land, counting escape routes, rethinking every inch of the house like it was a chessboard and every child a king he had to protect. Why are you writing all that? Finn asked, standing beside him in the low light. In case I don't make it, Joshua said. You'll need to know how to finish the game. I don't want to finish it without you, Finn said. Joshua reached over and gripped the boy's shoulder. That's why I'm trying not to lose. But Crowley didn't want a game, he wanted fear, and he was good at it. The following evening, one of the horses returned. Alone. Covered in blood. Not its own. The sheriff spotted it first, limping toward the fence, reins dragging, eyes wild with panic. Joshua recognized the markings on the saddle. It belonged to a rancher 2 valleys over, a good man who kept to himself, never raised a hand in anger. Joshua rode out at once alone, ignoring the sheriff's protests. He found the ranch burned. Not fresh, not new, a day or 2 old at least. The bodies had already been buried, but the markers were twisted. No names, just numbers carved into wood, 654, a countdown. Joshua turned his horse hard and galloped back. When he returned, he gathered the children and lined them up against the back wall of the house. You all know how to get to the root cellar, he said. They nodded. If I ever tell you to run, you do it. No questions, no waiting. You run until your legs give out, then you crawl. Understand? Another nod, some slower than others. Good. But June didn't nod. She stepped forward and held up her hands. You're not sending us away, she said. I'm sending you to safety. No, she said fierce now, you are safety. Joshua knelt in front of her, heart tight. Then I'll give you every second I can. She wrapped her arms around his neck, sudden and silent, and Joshua held her like he had nothing else in the world, because that's what it felt like. The countdown wasn't metaphor. The next day, a stranger arrived. Not on horseback, by foot. Clothes clean, hands soft, no gun. He walked right up to the gate and stood there, smiling. I'm here to talk, he called out. Joshua stood in the doorway. The sheriff stayed inside, shotgun cocked and steady. Talk fast, Joshua said. The man grinned. Mr. Crowley sends his regards. Joshua didn't flinch. He can keep them. He wanted me to deliver a message. Joshua crossed the yard, boots heavy in the dirt. I'm listening. The man smiled wider. Tomorrow, sundown, he'll come himself. Says if you're still here, you're part of the problem. I always was, Joshua said. The man chuckled. He says to tell the children goodbye. Joshua struck him then. One blow, just enough to send him spinning into the dust. Tell him, Joshua said. I've been saying goodbye for years. If he wants to hear it in person, he can come die on my porch. They didn't sleep that night. The sheriff stayed up carving notches in spare boards, fitting them into slats to reinforce the back of the house. Joshua sat outside, oiling his rifle. Finn cleaned the knives. June carried water like a soldier. Even Clara and Wren helped scatter broken glass under the windowsills. It wasn't about stopping Crowley. It was about making him bleed first. The hours bled slow. By late afternoon the next day, clouds gathered. Not the kind that brought rain, the kind that just looked like morning. The first riders appeared at the edge of the field. Then more. 6, 10, 14. By sundown, 20 men surrounded the homestead. Crowley rode at the front. Hat low, smile cruel. Joshua stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, staring down at the man who turned children into coins and pain into business. Joshua Harlow, Crowley said, dismounting. I expected less gray. I expected more fight. Instead, I find a farmer with orphans and a death wish. Joshua didn't move. You're not touching them. Crowley looked around, eyes scanning the windows. They're not yours, he said. You think that matters. You think blood makes them safe. No, Joshua said, but I do. Crowley laughed. You're just a man, one, and I brought 20. Then they're outnumbered, Joshua said. That flickered the brief flash in Crowley's eyes. Not fear, not yet, but curiosity. Joshua didn't give him time to think. The first shot dropped the rider to Crowley's left. Finn from the loft. The second took another, Sheriff. Chaos erupted. Joshua rolled from the porch as bullets tore through the front of the house. Screams, the sound of glass shattering, horses rearing. He didn't check who screamed, only hoped it wasn't high-pitched. They fought like men, with nothing left to lose. Crowley's men surged forward, but every foot closer was a mistake. The traps held. The glass shredded boots. The oil Joshua had soaked into the outer walls lit with a spark, sending flames licking along the perimeter, forcing the riders inward, closer, where the children had been moved to the barn, and the barn now held something unexpected. Finn lit the fuse. The small charge Joshua had buried beneath the shed wasn't meant to kill. Just distract. The explosion sent a roar across the field, and in the smoke, Joshua moved. He tackled one rider, shot another point blank. Crowley saw him and turned. They met halfway. Joshua's fist slammed into Crowley's jaw. Crowley hit back with the butt of a pistol. Blood flew. Neither fell. They grappled in the dirt, snarling like animals until the sheriff's shotgun cracked and Crowley went still. Not dead. Just stunned. Joshua pulled him up by the collar. Call them off, he said. Crowley smiled, blood in his teeth. You're still going to lose. Joshua didn't respond. He just struck him again. Crowley dropped. The riders began to retreat, one by one, the ones who could. Joshua stood over Crowley, chest heaving. Next time, the sheriff said behind him, don't let him speak. Joshua nodded, then turned and walked back to the house, where June was waiting in the doorway. She didn't cry. She just opened her arms. And for a long second, Joshua let himself believe maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. But behind them, Crowley's eyes opened. And he smiled. They didn't bury Crowley. The sheriff had wanted to shoot him clean through the head before the man even stirred from the dirt, but Joshua shook his head and said one word, no. Then he ordered rope, iron, and a spare wheel axle from the barn. What they built wasn't much, just a makeshift cell, reinforced with steel hooks and bolted to the corner of the smokehouse, with nothing but a damp patch of ground beneath it. Crowley sat slumped inside it now, wrists tied behind his back, ankles chained. He didn't speak for the first few hours, didn't struggle, didn't beg. He just watched as though this part, The part where he was the one in the cage wasn't the end of his story at all. "You sure about this?" the sheriff asked, standing over the man as the sun bled low in the sky, "keeping him alive after what he's done?" Joshua said nothing at first. He leaned against the fence post, arms crossed, watching Crowley with a stare that felt carved from stone. "Dead men don't talk," Joshua said finally, "and I need to know how far this goes." The sheriff scoffed. "You already know how far. You saw it with Lark. You saw it in the girl. You saw it in the barn. I need to hear it from him." Inside the house, the children stayed close. Too close. Clara hadn't left Wren's side since the firefight. Ellis still wouldn't speak. June, who had once held herself like she didn't know how to be a child anymore, had crawled into Joshua's bed in the middle of the night and curled up without a word. "I had a dream," she whispered. Joshua stroked her hair. "What kind of dream?" "You were gone." He didn't say it wouldn't happen. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. Instead, he said, "If I'm gone, you run. If you can't run, you fight, but don't ever give up, not even for me." June nodded into his chest. "I wouldn't." By morning, Crowley had begun to hum. Not a song Joshua recognized, just a low, tuneless hum, rising and falling like the sound of a snake beneath the floorboards. Joshua stood in front of the cage, watching him through the slats. "You're waiting for something," Joshua said. Crowley tilted his head, a slow grin pulling at his cracked lips. "Always." "You've already lost." "Have I?" Joshua didn't blink. "You came here thinking I'd fall, thinking I'd run. You thought the children would break, but you lost every man you brought, and you're in a cage built by the people you called weak." Crowley's eyes narrowed. "You think this ends with me?" "No," Joshua said. "I think it ends with the truth." And then, for the first time since he was dragged to the cage, Crowley laughed. Not a wild, unhinged sound, just cold, quiet satisfaction. "You think I ran this alone," he said. "You think the market lived and died with Lark and me. You think there aren't a dozen more like me, waiting, selling, trading, hunting. You killed one link in a chain, Harlow, but the chain still wrapped around this whole territory." Joshua felt it like a stone in his gut. "You want to protect them," Crowley went on, nodding toward the house. "You can't, not all of them, not forever. Sooner or later someone will take them. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually." Joshua stepped forward, crouching just outside the bars. "I used to believe that," he said. "That no matter what you built, the world would tear it apart. But you know what I learned from those children?" Crowley didn't reply. "I learned that what's broken can still fight back." That night Joshua rode to Fallen Crossing. He didn't tell the sheriff where he was going. He didn't wake Finn or June. He left a note, simple and short. "If I'm not back in 2 days, burn the smokehouse and take them east." The ride took half the night. He didn't stop, didn't speak, just rode until his horse foamed at the mouth and the lights of the town blinked through the trees. There he went straight to the church. It wasn't faith he was after, it was the records. Inside, a gray-haired woman sat at a desk, lantern low, ledger open. She looked up as he entered. "I need a name," he said, "and I need it now." She raised an eyebrow, not much to go on. He slid a crumpled parchment across the desk. A letter Crowley had once sent, unmarked, unsigned, but the handwriting matched the note on the barn. She studied it. "There's a banker," she said after a pause. "Out east, name of Weston Pyre, quiet man, richer than God. He owns half the freighting lines and every iron shipment north of Lark's territory. No kids, no wife, pays large donations to the church, though." Joshua leaned in. "He ever buy land near Bitter Hollow?" She nodded slowly. "Not land, but he funded an orphanage." Joshua's stomach turned. "Where is he now?" "Last I heard, he's riding west, supposed to open another trade house just outside Dry Hill." Joshua didn't sleep that night. He rode hard back home, mind burning with the realization that Crowley had been just the beginning. The children hadn't just been stolen for cruelty. They'd been sold, laundered, shipped like goods, and men in clean clothes and shining boots had paid handsomely for the silence. By the time he reached the ridge overlooking the homestead, smoke rose. At first his heart stopped, fear pounding like thunder, but it wasn't fire. It was steam. From the still the sheriff had fired up, a signal, one Joshua had taught him in the early days. Trouble, but not from outside. He galloped down the hill and reached the house just as Finn threw open the door. "He's gone," the boy said. "Crowley, the cage is empty." Joshua pushed past him into the smokehouse. The cage had been torn open from the inside, not with strength, with help. A broken padlock lay on the floor, the iron bar pried loose, a set of footprints in the ash bare feet, small. He turned to Finn. "Where's Wren?" "She was with June this morning. Then she said she needed air." Joshua's hands clenched. She let him out. The sheriff arrived, winded, pistol drawn. "North Trail, there's Prince, heavy and fast. He's not riding." Joshua turned to Finn. "Stay here, lock the doors. No one opens anything until I'm back." "But—" "Finn, you're the man of the house till I return. Keep them safe." He rode again, for hours, through mud and fog and thicket, until finally in the clearing beyond the riverbed he saw them. Wren sat on a fallen log, head down. Crowley stood beside her, breathing hard, blood on his mouth where a knot of wood had caught him during the escape. "You should have run farther," Joshua said, stepping from the brush. Crowley turned and missed the ending. "I'm giving you one last choice," Joshua said. "You surrender, face trial, or I finish this now." Crowley sneered. "You think there's a court out here that cares what men like me do?" "No," Joshua said, "but I do." Crowley drew his pistol fast. Joshua fired faster. One shot. Crowley dropped. Dead. The silence after wasn't relief. It was heavy, final. Joshua stepped toward Wren, whose face had crumpled not in grief, but in confusion. "I thought he was all I had," she whispered. "I didn't know who else to believe." Joshua knelt in front of her. "Then start here. Start with the people who never asked for anything from you, who never sold you, who never lied." Wren nodded slowly, tears streaking her dirt-caked cheeks. He led her back through the trees. The storm was over. But justice had only just begun. They buried Crowley with no name, no prayer, no stone, just dirt and silence. Wren hadn't spoken since Joshua pulled her from the clearing and the others kept their distance. Trust, once shattered, didn't return easy. That night Joshua offered a choice: go east and run or stay and fight. One by one they chose to stay. Weeks passed. Fences were mended, the barn rebuilt. June started smiling again. Even Ellis spoke, a quiet thank you as he helped plant spring potatoes. Then strangers started arriving, scarred, quiet, hungry for something they couldn't name. Joshua opened the door to each. No questions, no conditions. One evening a woman knocked, a boy at her side. "They said you help people like us," she whispered. Joshua stepped aside. "You're home now." The world outside hadn't changed, but inside this house something had. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were family. And family didn't turn anyone away.